Good day, I'm Philip de Vries and I'm coming to you from George, South Africa with another version of a program that we call Our World Today. And here we are in the studios talking about some very interesting times that I know is going to be a tremendous challenge to everybody as we all collectively join together and make some kind of a response, because that's what television is for, not just to watch for entertainment, but also to provoke us to action. Having said all that, I am glad to welcome back into the studio my friend, Jacques van der Merwe. As you can see, he's got his Heartland Broadcasting shirt on.
I always have Heartland Broadcasting
stuff. Whether black or red or mustard. Today it's mustard.
It must be a good one.
Mustard must be.
I don't know what else to say. Thank you very much, Philip, that I can be with you almost every week.
Almost every week. You know, there's been a lot that's been happening during the course of this past week, and
it's been a serious week for us.
Very, very much so. There's been a lot of trials and tribulations and any amount of things that we've had to walk through that I think have been very testing indeed. But nevertheless, it's been a good week as well.
It was.
Because we've also had elections.
And that's the big thing that we're most probably going to be talking about this time is the elections.
Very much so here in South Africa.
Yeah.
Certainly not in the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen, or in any other part of the world, but we've certainly had ours. And it's been a long time coming to be able to have these elections 25 years
later,
after democracy has arisen in South Africa. That's significant. A quarter of a century, and it seems like it's just flown on by.
It has. Unfortunately, I would have thought that it would look different, but it might in some ways look much more that we are much worse off than before. But there is still hope.
You know what, Jacques? I have a great sense of history because I am, after all, 71 years old.
What? I thought you 55.
No, I don't believe in a spirit of deception.
Okay, all right.
Nevertheless, the point is, I can go back and remember distinctly what it was like to vote in 1994 for the very first time, because I was not living in South Africa at that point. I was living in the U.S.
Okay.
I was registered because I was a permanent resident for many years in South Africa, which I am also at the moment a permanent resident in South Africa, simply because it's been renewed again.
Okay.
And
nice.
So it's been able to have the privilege one more time
to go vote.
To vote.
So now on Wednesday you went to vote. How did you experience it in comparison?
You know what, the experience, it's been kind of like a deja vu, because once again we're having this privilege, we're having this honor to be able to go to the polls, but it's so nice to be able to see all the different backgrounds of people coming together on election day, and recognizing that we're making something of destiny, because these have been critical elections with the backdrop that we've had this year with all the corruption charges and everything else that have come into play, and all the investigations. I mean, they talk about the investigation in my home country, the United States of America, but all of that came to nothing after 2 years of so much antagonism. And so here we are, but there's substantive stuff that's coming into play, and it's all related to the politics of this land.
Yeah. Now, see, our whole political playground, in the US, you basically have two parties.
Quite so.
And then independents, which I don't understand how that works, but in South Africa, I'm not sure how many different parties we had on the ballot list. Wasn't like
48.
48 of them. I thought it was 42. And here's the thing. Our political arena looks as follows. You've got the ANC, that's the ruling company at this stage, the ruling party at this stage.
Something like that.
You've got the Democratic Alliance, the DA, that is pretty much the second strongest one opposing them. And then you've got your other groups, the EFF, you've got the Freedom Front, then you've got the Christian parties, of which,
You've got COPE as well.
yeah, with all the little parties that just came out, a lot of them are Christian parties. A lot of them are just people standing in one town wanting to make their voice known. And so it's a whole bunch of different people just trying to get into the thing, bringing their way of thinking in. And it can be a total mess up with
Yeah,
everything.
it's very interesting because right here in the city of George, we had one guy who's not even part of a mainstream party in the city of George, no less. But you saw posters of this guy
Standing
who-
for president.
standing for premier,
For premier.
for premier
I saw one where
of
he
the
said,
Western
he
Cape.
said for president, and I was like, and what? We don't know even who you are, and you want to be president. But that brings in the question. Now, some of the newest parties. Now, you got to hear this one, and it's not to make jokes of it, but you know, it just leans towards making fun of. There's a new party called the Good Party.
I know,
They're brand new.
yes.
And they're saying, we know how to make South Africa work again.
Yeah.
Making South Africa great again. And you know, how do you know if your party is 4 months old, 5 months old, how do you know how to fix the country?
Yeah.
If you've been located in one spot in the country, how do you know how to fix the whole country? You don't know the people of the North. You don't understand what their lifestyle is.
Yeah.
You don't know what they need.
Yeah.
And with a lot of these parties, like for instance, now there's one in George that wants to be premier then, or president like I saw. How does he think he is going to work and manage the northern provinces and the other areas where he doesn't even know the people, where people don't even know him, and he wants to run for big things like that?
Yeah, there is no answer to that because it's foolishness. It's absolute tomfoolery kind of stuff. I'm sorry, but you know, the pettiness
Yeah.
that was attached to this. However, one of the things I wrote on Facebook, which I referenced, many people made comments about it, and I appreciated their comments as well. But we have to see things in a spiritual light because right from the word go, you've got that fight in the heavens between Almighty God and Satan, whereupon Satan was thrust down to earth. Where did that spirit come from? It came from this desire for power. That desire for power. And
Yeah.
you see, that's why you've got so many of these parties running around.
Yeah.
It's one man or one lady that are desiring to have power.
Yeah.
And that's the way psychologically and whatever they feel that they can get it. But people have got to wade through all this kind of stuff. I mean, not so long ago in a municipal election, one candidate stood up who was a total anomaly, totally, because he had said one thing prior when he resigned from one party, then he joined another party, and guess what? He had one vote when he changed parties, when all was said and done. Give me a break. I mean, it's time for people, sorry to say this, Jacques, but it's time for people to start getting their act together and start humbling themselves. Because, hey, not everybody can have power, and it's time to get realistic about that.
And the interesting thing at this stage, I'm going through the Bible, and I'm now in the segment of Kings. And very interestingly enough, there's a lot of similarities. So many different kings coming into power, wanting to be the man on top, doing their own thing. And you know what? Every time God said to them, if you follow me with everything,
Yeah, that's a good
meaning
point.
that not even like some of the kings, whether it was for Israel or Judah, they would get rid of the idols, but not everything. But they did good. But yet they didn't do everything. And God would have mercy on them, but they wouldn't be in total line with what God wanted. And now the question is now for us, is Christianity only a church thing for us, or is God such a reality? Is Jesus, is the Holy Spirit such a reality in our lives that even with decisions like which party you're going to vote for, but not only that, what are you doing afterwards by the people that are elected.
Yeah.
How are you going to behave towards them? How does God want you to behave towards them?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to do is to remember that when it comes to people that are elected, first of all, they have responsibility to the people that elected them. Secondly, there has to come somewhere where the people that are involved in the electoral process don't stop at that point. Because, there's a necessity for people in power to have a conscientious and a consistent voice coming to them to create a conscience inside of them, because sometimes they are in such power that they lose their conscience. And you see that
Compromising.
they're knocking down on one area or another area. And I think that as Christians, our job is to be a prophetical voice to the people in power. And to me, that's our responsibility when it comes down to the whole political mechanism that we are definitively a part of. When all is said and done, that's where we have to be. Elections mean nothing. You see, you've got bad politicians, you've got some good politicians. The good ones can become better.
Yes.
But my problem with many people is that the good candidates oftentimes do not stand up
Yes.
and become electable simply because they're too afraid of what's going to happen once they get elected.
Yeah.
And so they're denying their own responsibility. I really believe the time has come for good people to stand up with good people around them and to surround themselves with people that will speak in. That's what we do all the time. If you see me involved in some miscreant kind of activity, you have a right to tell me, hey, back down, Mr. DeFries.
Yeah.
And I have the right to do the same to you. Why? Because there's accountability.
Yes.
And that's what we need in politics over and over again.
Yeah. And I think that's with the movement with Arno van Niekerk.
The New Nation movement.
That they really want to keep these guys accountable and say, think about your choices. Make good choices, not because they want to be in power, but because the people of the country are suffering because of the few that's sitting at the top, enjoying their comfort.
Yes.
And that's not what it's supposed to be.
Not a bit.
They're supposed to be working for the people.
Yes.
And a lot of times, not only in South Africa, if you look at Argentina, if you look at, forget Argentina.
Venezuela.
Everywhere, Russia, Korea, North Korea, China, everywhere it pops out.
Yeah.
Where time after time it happens that the guys at the top are living in comfort and the people who put them there don't have a choice. They still live in poverty.
Yeah. And talking about that, in the Bible, there is no such thing as democracy. You don't see it anywhere.
Yeah.
You don't see it. But what you do see is good leaders, bad leaders.
Yes.
What you do see is people that have been called to be servants, but they're anything but servants. And you see, we have that high honor. And a lot of people in many parts of the world do not have that honor that we have. Therefore, the honor that we have demands that we become responsible citizens to make sure that these people that are in power don't become pig-headed. You get what I'm saying?
So what was our response last week on the program with Brett?
Well,
because he talks a lot about leadership
Yes, he does.
and he focuses a lot on leadership.
Well, one of the things that's going to arise from this is that there will be a transformation kind of sequence of events that will start beginning to happen in this area. But there was also something that we were talking about, which is arising from out of last week, which is what they would call an economic summit, which is going to be transplanted from Lagos and is going to come to South Africa, and then it's going to begin to kind of ease its way into all the different precincts around South Africa. And it's fascinating because a lot of leaders came together while he was here.
Okay.
And there's a total commitment to be able to do this, and I think we'll see some exciting developments coming from out of that result in economic, political, and spiritual transformation in our country. The word transformation means a metamorphosis coming from one sequence to another and taken from out of something which crawls into something which flies, kind of a thing, like a caterpillar to a butterfly. And we've got to get rid of man's definition of transformation. We've got to have God's transformation, which is a transformation of heart that results in a transformation of action.
Yeah.
Getting engaged in our community and making a difference.
There's a nice joke about that.
Oh my, I
Yeah.
want to hear
We
this.
always say there are 10 birds on a telephone line. 9 of them decide to fly away. How many are left?
Talk to me.
All 10 of them, because the 9 only decided to fly away. And that's something that I also want to talk about today.
Yes.
Is that if you look through everything here, like for instance with transformation, it's got to do with the way that you think. And the Bible is full of that.
Yes.
Where God says, change the way that you think.
Yes.
Get a
called
new
repentance.
mindset. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I really want to talk to you about what's happening in the US at this stage.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, if there were news articles from other parts of the world, it would most probably look similar, that you'd get down to the way of thinking.
Yes.
I'd like to get your opinion about what's going on in the US with the way of thinking, because now we've been talking a lot about the right wings
Yes.
and the left wing,
Yes. Yes.
and it seems like the left wing is making a whole bunch of very weird decisions.
They call it the radical left.
And a lot of those things like the Green Deal and this whole transgender thing and
Yes.
everything doesn't make sense, because it sounds good and everybody is extremely excited about it, but it really reminds me of that old story about the king's clothing, where if you don't smile and go bananas about the king's clothing, you'll chop your head off. But yet those two guys cheated the king by making him clothes that didn't exist. And they were ranting and raving about all this beautiful invisible clothing, and everybody knew if they wouldn't say what the king wanted them to hear, their heads would be chopped off.
Well, there you
So the
go.
king started ranting and raving about all this beautiful clothing that these guys, it's magical, you cannot see it unless you're special, and everybody wants to be special. So everybody just saw this beautiful cloak that he had on, yet the guy didn't have any clothes on, until one kid screamed, "Look, the king doesn't have any clothes on." And then people, and it seems like it's happening now, because I saw this video clip this past week
Okay.
where the girl athletes,
Yes.
I think it's in Connecticut,
I think you are absolutely. It is in
Yeah.
Connecticut.
where they starting to raise their voice, because some boys that are identifying themselves as girls, respect to whatever decision they make, but they're choosing to be girl athletes,
Yes.
but they're not. They're mediocre male athletes that
Yes.
as soon as they can start competing against the girls, they're amazing girl athletes.
Yes.
But it takes away some of the dignity
Yes.
of the girl athletes. What do you think about that one?
Well, I think that the whole issue has to be handled in a scientific and compassionate way. And so when we start talking about transgender, I don't want to listen to the emotional left. I have no desire to listen to them, because that emotional left is making its appeal to emotion and not to science.
Yeah.
Because science declares strongly, and more doctors are coming out and saying it, there's the chromosomes that are from a male and there's chromosomes of a female. There is no mixed chromosomes. On the most part, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So what's happening is that people are saying, well, we can choose what we want to be in this life, which is basically assuming that they can take the place of the way God made us. And,
But they don't recognize God anyway.
well, they don't.
So it's their choice anyway. So if they want to believe that they're a girl, it's fine if men want to do that.
Yeah.
But now what happens when, what's that lady from the left that's the Speaker of the House?
Nancy Pelosi.
She brought in this whole thing about transgender that
Yeah.
you cannot say anything about it. So now you get a situation where it's not only the decision that I made about
Yes.
how I feel about myself,
Yes.
but now you're going into athletics identifying as a girl, but you're not. You still have the body of a man. You're competing against girls, and this is not breaking girls down or their worth or anything. Each one is created special in the way that they are.
bet.
But if you cross those lines, this is not only the way that you think, but now physically they're competing against girls, and it's not working. What do you do with that?
I think that we have to recognize that it's time to get real again. We have to legislate it, and if people don't like what they're seeing, they have the right to go to the ballots. Because just like we had this past week in South Africa, if you don't like the trend that's happening, then go and change it. It's like what happened in 2016. Nobody said that Donald Trump was going to become president of the United States. But the people of America said otherwise.
Yeah.
They said, we've had enough of the compromising and all the different garbage that was coming from the far left. And they put the far left in its place. And ever since then, the far left refuses to roll over and die.
Yes.
Because they
Yes.
want to say, we want our way. We're going to get our way.
Absolutely.
And guess what? Works the same way on the far right as well. They don't like it when people begin to say, hey, wait a minute, there's a happy center that we need to find. And that's where, when you've got the ability to vote, do it.
Yeah.
Get it in there and make the changes.
Yeah. And jumping to a next thing now.
Yes.
But we're still on the mindset. And you know what? I don't want to trash America. I mean, I did summer camp there for 11 years, and I love the people. I really like Americans. Maybe that's why I like you. Must be.
I think we're an amazing bunch of people.
Yes.
There's 320 million of us.
There's a lot of you to go around. So now, one of the sad points that's a real, it's a real thing for me is that, and just because I don't have an answer to say, yeah, but maybe America should do this or do that. But there's been too many school shootings, and now there's been another one in Denver this week.
Yeah. That cuts very close to home too, because it happened just a few miles away from where my sister lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is going on in schools? Isn't it maybe because of this confusion that through the way of thinking, where each one needs to be special, that the way that people are thinking now in the US is confusing, it's messed up, and it causes that you get school shootings as it's happening at this stage, because you don't see that really anywhere else in the world.
I've been a teacher in my past life, and I've seen it with my own eyes. Two thoughts. After the shooting happened in Columbine, which is also in Denver.
It's a couple of miles away from where this shooting happened now.
I wrote an article. I don't have it here in front of me, but I can tell you right now. It had quite a reaction. Number one, my first reaction is it's time for people in the schools, kids, to stop bullying one another. Number one. Number two, it's time to stop profiling people that are different from us and begin to single them out for special kind of rejection.
Or a special treatment.
Yeah, whatever. But I see this over and over again. Kids rip on each other. That's another thing that comes up. And they've got to stop this stuff. And we tell that in the schools that I was in. We told them straight out, you stop ripping on one another. You think you're joking with somebody, but somebody is taking that seriously. And, that's one of the problems that we have. We're too free to speak.
And say whatever we want to.
And to be insensitive and indelicate to people's feelings, Jacques. And it's very, very wrong. And, when I came to South Africa, you know what the first thing was that I noticed in South Africa? People respect each other.
Yes, and we've mentioned this on the
program. Especially in the schools.
Yeah, we've mentioned this before, the respect. Like, for instance, respect towards the president.
Yes.
Or let me say it like this, respect towards the presidency.
Yes.
Forget about Donald Trump. But, I mean, if you've got respect for your presidency, you're not going to do what a lot of journalists have been doing, or far left or far right, or people have just been saying whatever they want to. If you've got respect for people around you, you're gonna not sit with all these kind of things. But what I'm trying to ask you now as well, do you think parents are at fault for this?
I don't always think that's the case. I think sometimes there's what we call the latchkey situation, which in Columbine was certainly a scenario that I remember, because the kids were left to themselves. There was no mom and dad at home, and so the kids were left to themselves to do whatever they wanted to. And so when they come home from school, nobody's there to greet them. I think parents can contribute to that, especially if they've become distant from their kids. But I think that the point is parents are struggling to make ends meet.
That is a good point, because our lifestyle is of such a kind. I mean, we run around like crazy. I'm a little bit of a serious workaholic at this stage.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't do much. I have to force myself to do other things,
Yes.
because I'm so focused on what we're doing here at the studios. But if I look at some of my friends that's full-time working, whether it's in the IT industry or business or wherever, I mean, they've got so much focus needs to go into their businesses to make a living, because life is really expensive these days.
Yes.
That you don't get around to your kids. And if you don't make a full-on effort to really be involved with your kids and building relationship.
That's a key point, and it goes back to politics too, because what do the politicians do? In order to enhance their own lifestyle, what they do, they go out there and add taxes. I mean, come on.
Interesting.
I mean, look here in South Africa, 65% of our petrol price is going into the hands of the government.
Yes, and look at the price that we're paying for
Look
petrol.
at it. I mean, it's
gas at this
17
stage.
rand a liter
Yeah,
for
yeah.
petrol in South
And
Africa.
that's got to influence. Oh, now we're going on a different course here.
Yeah.
That goes into your food prices.
You bet.
It goes into entertainment.
Multiplies.
It goes into everything. So your government is really, and I think we're getting back to something that I said at the beginning of the program.
Yeah.
Government is supposed to be there for the people.
Yes.
And at this stage,
Yes.
government is not for the people, because people are not doing good in their lifestyle, because they're so much under pressure of what the government is forcing onto them
Yes.
that it's not working. And the question is, how are we going to change it? Not only in South Africa with the voting and the political systems and whatever, but even in the US with the way that the guys think. And I'm pretty sure that's everywhere in the world, that a small group of people, their way of thinking has an influence on the greater group of people.
Therefore, the concept of what we call special interest groups. And I don't have a problem with that, special interest groups. Why do I say that? Because it's part of democracy.
Okay.
Special interest groups can do them. But our politicians need to make a choice. In their heart, they know what's right. But we as believers in Jesus Christ believe that we need to be a conscience to the leaders of our nation. And we need to do that consecutively. We need to be engaged in the process. We need to be involved in transformation of our communities. We actually need to have people that really get down to brass tacks and start getting into the back streets of our communities, so that transformation that we've talked about can actually become a reality in everybody's life.
One of my favorite new words is salt. The Bible says that we need to be salt
Yes.
and the light. You know what? I realized that we truly, as the Bible said, we need to be salt
Yes.
to the world. We need to have influence. We shouldn't overpower it. We shouldn't overpower it, because too much salt is terrible. Go to the Dead Sea and have a little bit of a drop on your lip, and you'll understand what I mean. Yeah.
Then
But
they're done it.
yes, but the right amount of salt will have a great influence,
Yeah.
and that's what we need to do.
That's a great word to finish off with. And talking about that, there's a lot of things that are happening in terms of the film world, per se,
Yes.
and a lot of productions that are beginning to make themselves felt, because you and I serve on the board of the Garden
Film
Route
Office.
Film Office. And I think there's going to be some exciting developments that are going to be felt here, and not the least of which is that we are trusting. We can't talk about it at this stage, but next week we are hoping against hope on this very program that a very, very hefty man in the film industry will be our guest
Yes.
right here
Yes.
on this program. So you can pray about that and help us pray in that direction, ladies and gentlemen.
It's going to be interesting to
Because
have him here.
it would be
Just to hear what he's
because
saying.
he's going to be around. We need to get him into the studio and get some of the things that are happening, because we see some spectacular developments here. And having said all that, Jacques, thank you for giving us all of your good thoughts today. And
It's a pleasure.
don't forget, beloved, that you can make a difference. You are the solution to the dilemmas in our community. And you're not going to be answered to that by just sitting back and doing nothing. Let's become a voice box. Let's become proactive. Let's get engaged with our community. Let's make a difference. Please join us again next week when, as we were addressing just a moment ago, we're going to address some real interesting issues about the movie industry. And I think we should do that, actually, even if our special guest is not with us.
We'll
Jacques.
talk about the movies, because there are some exciting things coming up
Yeah.
in the movie world.
There really are.
And the influence that movies has. I know that's a good point to talk about. We're going to do that next week. Talk about the movies.
Having said that, that's it for now. And take care. God bless. Bye-bye.